بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all after this break. We will continue on our study of the book of Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, Adda, waDDawa. And before the break, we got to the part where Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala highlighted to us that one of the ways or one of the reasons why we sometimes lack in righteousness and lack in following and doing what Allah has commanded and lack in believing that actions have consequences is the lack of certainty, the lack of yaqeen, and the lack and yaqeen. When somebody is lacking yaqeen, what do they need to do? They need to be reminded of it if they knew it from before but they forgot it, and if they haven't developed it at all, they need to follow the guidance of the Quran, which will point them in the right direction as to how they should think, where should they reflect in order to develop their yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in all cases, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, so whoever abandons righteousness is maghrur, is deluded. Whether he believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his promises and threats, and yet still abandons the akhirah, the reward of al-akhirah, because of an instant pleasure of dunya, or if he denies Allah and if he belies the prophets of Allah and he denies the reward and the punishment of Allah, the reward and the punishment of Allah, then he is deluded and he is a loser in both ways. Now he moves on to something that's very relevant, which is the question of, is it possible that somebody might be certain about Allah, certain about his promises and threats, Jannah and Nar, certain about his prophets, yet lacks righteousness? Is this a possible thing? The answer is yes. How could one believes with certainty, yet when we look at the actions are not really matching? No, he's certain, but there are other things that are crowding out the certainty. So what we need to do, we need to look into these things that will compromise the benefit we get from certainty. So in this section here, we will be looking at how one can be certain about the hereafter, the concept of actions and consequences, yet they lack in righteousness. They don't do the right thing. They don't obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They commit sins. How does that happen to us? So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, فَإِن قُلْتَ كيف يجتمع التصديق الجازم الذي لا شك فيه بالمعاد والجنة والنار ويتخلف العمل. If one was to ask, how could there be certain belief without any doubt that there is a day of judgment and there is Jannah and Nar, however, actions and righteousness are lacking? Is there, he says, can we observe any of the nature of humans that are capable of doing such things? For example, is it possible for one to know that, let's say in the park, there is a lion, a hungry lion that has been attacking people and doing all sorts of damage to humans? Can a person believe that and still go to the park? Do we experience this in anything other than the deen and working with righteousness for al-akhirah? He says, وَهَلْ فِي الطِّبَاعِ الْبَشَرِيَّةِ أَنْ يَعْلَمَ الْعَبْدُ أَنَّهُ مَطْلُوبٌ غَدًا إلى بين يدي بعض الملوك ليعاقبه أشد عقوبة أو يكرمه أتم كرامة ويبيت ساهيا غافلا لا يتذكر موقفه بين يدي الملك ولا يستعد له ولا يأخذ له أبته. Is it possible, let's say for example, in the kings of dunya, if one was to be told that tomorrow you are required to attend in the presence of this king, and this king will either reward you the most the most greatest of reward, or he will punish you the most severe of punishments. Is it possible that this person will not worry about tomorrow, that he can sleep his night without thinking, without worrying? Is this something in the human nature? That's what Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala is asking. Do you get that, Ajmana? قيل, the answer would be to this: هذا لعمر الله سؤال صحيح وارد على أكثر هذا الخلق واجتماع هذين الأمرين من أعجب الأشياء. He says, verily, this is an authentic question, a relevant question, and it is true to many people, meaning that they know something, but they don't act upon it. And combining the two together, belief in the hereafter, believing that you're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet not acting upon it, this is one of the most astonishing things when one thinks about it, but it does happen. It does happen. And then he speaks about why do we have this lack of righteousness despite of certainty. So that will be the title of this discussion here now. Why do we have lack of righteousness, lack of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lack of doing the right thing in every instant of our lives, when we have complete certainty that we're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we will be questioned about our actions? In the previous sections, we spoke about the person who doesn't have certainty, and we told them how they can develop certainty about Allah and His promises and threats. But now the person that has certainty, how could it be that you have certainty, you're going to meet Allah, you will be resurrected, you will be rewarded or punished, but you don't act righteously? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَهَذَا التَّخَلُّفُ لَهُ عِدَّةُ أَسْبَابٍ. There are few he says this lack of action has some possible causes. So we will study them now, inshallah. He says, أحدها, one of those causes, ضعف العلم ونقصان اليقين. ضعف العلم ونقصان اليقين. For one to have knowledge, but that knowledge is undeveloped, incomplete, immature type of knowledge, weak type of knowledge. Knowledge that is so faint, so weak, that isn't capable of propelling the person, moving the person into action. Like the motive, what motives do you have to do certain things? If you know that if you go to work, you will be rewarded by this, that, and this and that. The more incentives you have and the more you know of them, the more motivated you will become, right? So if there are incentives, but you are not aware of them, you are only aware of some of them, your motivation for work will be in accordance to how much of those incentives you know, right? So he says, al-ilm is not like a state of either on or off. Ilm is a spectrum. In the one side of the spectrum, people who have weak knowledge, and on the other side of the spectrum, we have people who are completely certain about their knowledge. Okay? So one has to understand that your actions are relevant or proportionate to your knowledge. How much knowledge do you have? Some people have basic knowledge about Islam, really basic knowledge about Islam, and they are wondering, why are my actions like this? Right? They say, I know there's Jannah and then there's Nar, but when I look at my actions, they're not righteous. I am not motivated to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do we tell them? We told them, you have knowledge, but this is too basic. You need to develop that knowledge. You need to add more to this knowledge. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Verily, the ones who truly fear Allah and act righteously are the ulama, the scholars. Why? Because they have amassed a lot of knowledge. And that's why they are able to become righteous. Right? So he said the first reason for why one will have certainty about the resurrection, Jannah and Nar, but not act appropriately, is that their knowledge is limited. And that's why we always say, my brothers and sisters, try to increase your knowledge, maximize your knowledge, keep on developing your knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the more likely you are going to act upon it. He says, ضعف العلم ونقصان اليقين. What results from the lack of knowledge or from the weakness of knowledge is that your certainty will not be in the right level that it can push you into action. So you will believe, but you don't have that belief in the level of yaqeen. If you are in the level of yaqeen, that yaqeen will cause you to act. Do you get this? So you have knowledge, but this knowledge is so weak that it cannot be called yaqeen. When it's strong enough, then it will be called yaqeen. Right? So that's why he says ضعف العلم, the weakness of knowledge, and نقصان اليقين, the diminishing or the shortcomings or the shortfall of yaqeen, the shortfall of certainty. But otherwise, if one in the level of certainty, definitely that will propel them into action. He says, وَمَنْ ظَنَّ أَنَّ الْعِلْمَ لَا يَتَفَاوَتْ فَقَوْلُهُ مِنْ أَفْسَدِ الْأَقْوَالِ وَأَبْطَلِهَا. Whoever thinks that knowledge is either a state of on or off, and it doesn't have degrees and shades, then this is the most wrong of opinions and views. He says this is the reason why Ibrahim alayhi salam, he asked his Lord to make him see how he resurrects the dead, right? The ayah I quoted before the break. He says, وَقَدْ سَأَلَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْخَلِيلُ رَبَّهُ أَنْ يُرِيَهُ أَحْيَاءَ الْمَوْتَى عَيَانًا. Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah to show him with his own eyes how he brings back the dead to life. بعد علمه بقدرة الرب على ذلك. Even though he has knowledge, Ibrahim alayhi knew that Allah is capable of doing that. طيب لكن ليزداد طمأنينة, to reach the level of yaqeen and to increase in yaqeen. So not only that Ibrahim alayhi salam had yaqeen, but he wanted to increase in his yaqeen. ويصير المعلوم غيبا شهادة. And listen to this very important statement. He says, until that which you know on the unseen becomes almost like something you can witness. You know, when you speak about something a lot, when you know the details of it, you always can draw it. If somebody gives you a pen and paper, you know, you can paint it, you can draw it because of how much details you have of it. You can close your eyes and you can almost envision and see how it would appear in reality, even though you have not seen it. But because of how much knowledge you have of it, it's almost as though you can see it. Right? For example, the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, من سره أن يرى يوم القيامة كأنه رأي عين فليقرأ إذا السماء انشقت إذا الشمس كورت وإذا السماء انفطرت. Whoever wants to see the day of judgment. See, the day of judgment is of the knowledge of unseen. We have not seen it. But if you want to see it as if you can see it with your own eyes, read these three surahs. Surah Al-Inshiqaq, Surah Al-Takwir, and Surah Al-Infitar. What will happen then? It will be as if you have seen, because of the knowledge and the details that are mentioned in these surahs. It will give you so much graphic, detailed information that almost you can see it with your own eyes. Right? The Prophet ﷺ was quoted in a hadith authentically reported in Musnad Imam Ahmad. He said, ليس الخبر كالمعاينة. ليس الخبر كالمعاينة. What does that mean? ليس الخبر, when one is informed about something, his state of belief in that thing is not like when they actually see it. ليس الخبر. Al-khabar is when you are informed, somebody tells you something. And then muayana is when you see it with your own eyes. Do you remember the example I gave you previously? If I tell you that I have in my pocket a sweet apple, you know, a delicious sweet apple. If you trust me, you will believe me, and you will know that I trust him. So I'm certain that he has in his pocket a sweet, delicious apple, right? But then when I take it out, Arish, if I take the apple out and show it to you, now you can see it with your own eyes. Is your knowledge of that apple the same, or it increased? It did increase. Now you've got some other senses involved in this, right? And then if I take that apple and throw it at you, and then you catch it, now you held it with your hand. Is that knowledge increased or in the same level? Yeah, it's increased. Now you believe that this is an apple and it's red, right? And if I take a bite, and you take a bite, and you do realize it is delicious, sweet apple, right? Now do you believe in it? So you can see that faith or knowledge about something is not 1 degree. The more you have access to it, the more you touch it, the more you feel it, the more you ponder on it, the more you reflect on it, the more details you have of it, the more your certainty will improve. So he says, so that's the first element. What is it? The lack of knowledge, the weakness of knowledge, which will cause you to drop in your faith from the level of certainty, from the level of yaqeen, into the level of weakness of yaqeen, ضعف اليقين, to say the least. And then he says, فإذا اجتمع إلى ضعف العلم عدم استحضاره. So if this on top of your weak, immature type of knowledge, in detailed or undetailed type of knowledge, if on top of that you have not been through it since a long time, it has been a long time since you revisited that knowledge. طيب عدم استحضاره. عدم استحضاره means you are unable to bring it in your conscious mind. It's there somewhere, but you don't often bring it to the forefront of your mind. That will make it even worse, صح? Yeah. So the knowledge is weak, and it's not even present in your conscious mind. It's somewhere there at the back. وغيبته عن القلب في كثير من أوقاته أو أكثرها. So it is not present in your heart. In most of the time, you are not present with it, with that knowledge, with that weak knowledge. لاشتغاله بما يضاده. Because you are preoccupied with something that is opposite to it. Look, think about this. When you become occupied with something that is contrary to what you believe in, what does that do to your yaqeen? It decreases it. It weakens it. Right? So, for example, you believe in the akhirah, but every bit of time that you spend in dunya affairs, it automatically weakens your yaqeen in the akhirah. Automatically, when you're working for dunya, right? Just the mere fact that you are working for dunya, that in itself weakens your certainty. And that's why if we want to keep our certainty while we do our jobs, while we do our chores around the house, while we do our tasks and activities, whatever we have to do of the dunya affairs, you need to make sure that you become conscious of a good intention. So that deed, one, is rewarded, but at least it will not be the reason why your iman and yaqeen becomes weakened. Right? A lot of the times, we engage in a lot of our dunya affairs. Right? We work on developing our dunya, which is something that is inevitable. We have to work. We have to go to studies. We have to do a lot of things. Right? But if we don't have intention that this is going to help us with our akhirah, I'm doing this for the akhirah, then that in itself weakens the iman. Because in the one hand, iman says, work for your akhirah. But your actions are doing what? You're working for dunya. Which of the two have more impact? Your speech or whatever you claim that is weak and in the back of your mind, or your actions that are louder and more powerful in creating your mindset? It's your actions. Okay? He says, وَانضَمَّ إِلَى ذَلِكَ تَقَاضِي الطَّبْعِ وَغَلَبَاتِ الْهَوَى وَاسْتِيلَاءِ الشَّهْوَةِ. And on top of that, add the following. He says, تَقَاضِي الطَّبْعِ, the natural inclinations. Because the nafs is inclined towards what? lazing about and doing nothing, just enjoying itself. That's the tabi' of the nafs. Right? So that, in addition to the weakness of knowledge, in addition to the fact that that weak knowledge is not in the forefront of your mind, in addition to the fact that you are occupied with something contrary to that knowledge, and on top of that, you find your tabi', your nature, you are inclined towards just lazing, sleeping, eating, drinking, having fun. Right? That makes the little knowledge you have is incapable of making you change something that is so intrinsic in your nature. وَغَلَبَاتِ الْهَوَى, when you are overcome with a certain desire, when you allow yourself, your nafs, to see something and develop desire to it, it will be very difficult to curb it, to control the nafs. When that happened, the little weak knowledge that you have isn't going to help you become righteous. When the nafs has become like a lion that wants to prey on a victim or on a prey, to eat it, nothing can stop that lion. صح? The ulama, they say the nafs, when it develops a desire towards something, a full desire towards it, it becomes more aggressive and unstoppable more than the lion. Okay? So that's why if you want to stop the nafs from aiming towards what it desires, you need to have a lot of power, a lot of power. That's why the ulama, they say you are better off not developing desire in the first place. You are better off not developing the desire in the first place, but because once the nafs have developed a desire towards one thing, it's difficult to stop it, especially if you have that weak knowledge that is in the back of your mind, that you are occupied with the opposite of it, and your tabi' is you are lazing about, and your nafs now has become aggressive about wanting something that is not consistent with the pleasure of Allah. And then he says, وَاسْتِيلَاءِ الشَّهْوَةِ. وَاسْتِيلَاءِ الشَّهْوَةِ. Istila al-shahwa, when one becomes enslaved by a desire. Sometimes you can contemplate a certain desire so much that it becomes a burning desire that is so difficult to rid yourself of it. All you want is that thing, whatever it may be, and it may be different from one person to another. But everybody should ask themselves, what is it that is a desire to me? And if it's fully developed, I no longer can control it. I'll become enslaved by it. Right? Some people are enslaved by the desire for status. They like to be popular. They like to be appreciated. They like to have respect. Some people are they develop desire to power and authority. They like to have control. Some others are motivated with money. That's their desire. They have desire for that. Right? So that if once that desire locks in, you will become enslaved by it. And now imagine when you become enslaved by this desire, and the knowledge that you have is so weak, how can it help you rid yourself of that, the shackles of desire? Will it help you? Right? So that's why he said, weak knowledge, and add on top of it all these complications. He says, وَتَسْوِيلُ النَّفْسِ. تَسْوِيلُ النَّفْسِ. This is the nafs where it lightens the transgression in your mind. It makes you feel that this is not a biggie. It's just something small. Allah will forgive. And given your circumstances, Allah will understand. This is not like a major sin anyway. This is one of the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive it by the time you pray. Allah will have forgiven. So the nafs will keep on arguing against you, against what Allah wants, and for what it desires. And that's what's called taswir al-nafs. It will keep on telling you that what you are about to transgress against is something minor. Right? وَغُرُورُ الشَّيْطَانِ. And on top of your nafs, the shaitan is working on you. So your nafs is arguing for its case. And is the shaitan going to just leave you to it now? The shaitan is going to add more to it, beautifying whatever the nafs has developed desire towards, beautifying it, and making you feel that, okay, you can do it and get away with it. So the shaitan will do ghurur. Anybody remembers the word ghurur, what it means? Ghurur shaitan. Ghurur means deception, but in a particular context. Deception in which one is deceived to feel safe when they're not safe. To feel safe from the consequences of his actions. So the shaitan, the nafs has developed desire and is aiming towards it. So the shaitan will focus on this area. You will get away with it. That is called غرور الشيطان. تغرير الشيطان. طيب واستبطاء الوعد. You know, and thinking that the promise of Allah is far. You know, like, okay, I will go to Jannah, but when? You know, I want my pleasure now. You know, so thinking that the promise of Allah is so far away, and this pleasure I so badly want it now. You know, I can't wait for the same pleasure of Jannah to come because I have a burning desire towards it. So this is called what? Istibta'ul wa'd. Thinking that the promise of Allah is true, but it's far. You know, who's going to wait until the day of judgment? Which is one of the deceptions of the shaitan. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, if you die, he said the only difference between a believer and entering Jannah is death. You know, and he mentioned this explicitly in the reward for somebody who recites Ayatul Kursi after each prayer. He says, whoever does this, then the only barrier between this person and entering Jannah will be death. So how would the person enter Jannah after death? Immediately, meaning they don't have to wait for the land of for resurrection and for accounting. How?
They'd have to wait, obviously, for resurrection. Or would they have no accounting?
No, the Prophet says the difference between a believer who recites Ayatul Kursi after each prayer and entering Jannah is death. They die and they go to Jannah. How is that possible? Yeah, by the soul. The soul will be admitted to Jannah. Prophet says the souls of the believers are birds in Jannah. So the minute you die, that's it. You are in Jannah already. Yes, you will have to wait for your body to be resurrected, and then your soul comes back and joins your body, and then enters Jannah together, both body and soul. That will happen when? After resurrection, after accounting, and after the Prophet ﷺ opens the gates of Jannah and all of that. Right? But the minute the person dies, immediately they go to Jannah. So somebody who could be thinking, oh, I can't wait for this, you know, they could die, and then they'll find themselves in Jannah. That's why in the hadith the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-Jannatu aqrabu ila ahadikum min shirakin alayh, wal-naru kadhalika. He says, Jannah is nearer to every one of you than the laces of your shoes. And so is the fire of hell. Because when somebody could die, and immediately as they die, they either go to Jannah or to the fire of hell. How? Body and soul, or only soul? Soul only. Right? The body and soul will be that. So that's istibta'ul wa'd. Thinking that, okay, I know Allah has promises. I know Jannah is good and beautiful, but really I can't wait. I want to have this pleasure now. So it's called believing that it is too long before I can enjoy the better option of pleasure. وَطُولُ الْأَمَلِ. طُولُ الْأَمَلِ. For one to think that I will live long, inshallah. And therefore, in this instant, I can gratify my desires, I can fulfill my wishes, I can, you know, and then in the future, there's time for me to repent, and then I will act righteously in the future. This is called طول الأمل, thinking that you will live long enough that now you can enjoy whatever you want to enjoy, and then in the future you can repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is called طول الأمل. Imagine if طول الأمل is also added to this mix. ورقدة الغفلة, for one to become completely heedless. The slumber of heedlessness. What does that mean, slumber of heedlessness? These are the times in which a person is not conscious of their purpose in life. You know, if you wake up in the morning and all you're thinking about is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to gain ajr. I want to gain ajr. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me pray this. Let me do my adhkar. And while I'm walking to work, I will do this dhikr. I will do salat al nabi. I will be fasting as well. So this is a person that is what? Heedful or heedless? Heedful. Heedful of what? Their purpose. I am in this dunya to acquire hasanat and reward. But there are times where something happened to you, you engage with dunya, and then you forget about all of that. How long does it take for you to go back into the mindset of working towards al-akhirah? It might be 6 hours or 7 hours, right, before something happens, and then you are back on track again. And sometimes it doesn't happen until the next day. Right? So raqdatul ghafla is the state of slumber, sleep, deep sleep, in which one becomes completely heedless, meaning forgetting their purpose, forgetting that there is actually a purpose for their existence. Right? So add this to that weak knowledge from the beginning. وَحُبُّ الْعَاجِلَةِ, the love of something quick. وَرُخَصُ التَّأْوِيلِ, وَرُخَصُ التَّأْوِيلِ means to find concessions for yourself. Saying that I am young in this land of disbelievers, and I have very little knowledge, and not many people support me. And you know what? I think Allah will understand if I go wrong here, if I go wrong there, and I'm probably better than other people who are completely disbelievers. People who do major sins. At least I am only doing this. This is called rukhasut ta'wil, thinking that you are in a better state. So for you, this is something that Allah will overlook. طيب. وإلف العوائد, إلف العوائد. This means to become so used to Allah's blessings. Every day in the morning, you wake up, you are healthy, your heart is in a good condition, your lungs are working, your brain is functioning, your eyesight is good, your hearing is well. Right? All of that will make you accustomed to these blessings that will just keep happening to you. Right? And that, as we discussed in a few chapters before, it will make you feel that you are deserving, you are entitled for good things happening to you. Right? And therefore, you will feel that a person such as yourself is likely to make a mistake and get away with it. Right? He says, فَهُنَاكَ, when weak knowledge and lack of certainty combined with all these elements together, فَهُنَاكَ, he says, لَا يُمْسِكُ الْإِيمَانَ إِلَّا الَّذِي يُمْسِكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ أَن تَزُولَ. He says, nothing will hold that iman firm in the heart except Allah, the one who's holding the heavens and earth from collapsing. Okay? So he's listing all of that as reasons why we are not able to benefit from the little iman, a little knowledge we have in our hearts. So do the opposite of all of that, the opposite of all of these together, and maybe you will be able to overcome this state whereby you believe in the akhirah, you believe in Jannah, you believe in Nar, but your actions are not in accordance to this. Okay? So one should be aiming towards what? You should be aiming towards increasing your level of knowledge as much as you can, so that it is a type of strong knowledge that is able to help you overcome your natural instincts. Right? So غلبة الطبع, something that is part of your nature, whether it is laziness or whether it is inclination to just do haram things or whatever. Right? For you to be able to overcome that, what do you need? Strong knowledge. So strengthening your knowledge, acquiring more and more knowledge should be a purpose for you, because only through strong knowledge you'll be able to overcome what? الطبع, the natural disposition, the natural state of the person. وغلبات الهوى واستيلاء الشهوة, when desires overcome a person, when somebody becomes enslaved by a burning desire, what will help a person overcome this? Strong knowledge. There has to be so strong knowledge. وتسويل النفس طيب وغرور الشيطان واستبطاء الوعد وطول الأمل. All these things that we listed before, you are only able to overcome them if you have strong knowledge. So what weakens us, my brothers and sisters in Islam, is our weak knowledge. We can only make it to al-akhirah, and we can only make it to act righteously and act like Muslims who will be salvaged in this dunya and in the akhirah by increasing our knowledge. Does that make sense? Inshallah. We will leave it here with Allah Ta'ala. And we will continue, inshallah, in the next class with Allah Ta'ala. But I will open the floor to receive your questions, inshallah, if they have any questions. Okay, if you have no questions, nothing to ask about, nothing to comment about, we will stop here with Allah Ta'ala. Trying to spend some time, Jazakumullah khair, going through your notes, even if you have to go through these classes again. You know, while you are working to university, while you are working to school, while you are working to work, you know, let it run in your mind. You know, because knowledge, when it first hits your mind, it is so immature that it doesn't have any influence. It doesn't have much influence on you. You know, for it to have the influence you want it to have, you need to empower it. You need to allow it to come and settle in your head. So listen to it again, write it, involve writing it about it, talk about it to other people, you know, think about these concepts in your head, you know. Only then you are allowing this knowledge to mature and to become more powerful and more potent, and then it will affect you in terms of your actions and in terms of your righteousness. We'll stop here with Allah Ta'ala. May Allah guide us all. May Allah increase us all in knowledge and in righteousness. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم من كل ذنب وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.